This is episode 42 with Tom Schwab.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What's up, Men of Abundance? We have none other than Tom Schwab from Interview Valet on the show today. I'm extremely excited about this conversation. But before we bring Tom on, I want to talk a little bit more and remind you about what I mentioned in episode 39, where I mentioned that a Men of Abundance is at a pivot point right now. And based on some feedback from some of you and some advice from a couple of my mentors, to include Mark Asquith from episode 40 and Jeff Woods from episode 42. If you have not had the chance to listen to either of those two episodes, I strongly encourage you to go do so because Mark and Jeff are definitely very abundant leaders and they drop some amazing value bombs for you on both of those episodes. So this Friday, episode 43, I'm going to break it all down for you. It's just going to be you and I. I'm going to share with you my lessons learned over the last 3 months of launching this podcast. In fact, it's going to extend more than 3 months because the podcast has just been live for the last 3 months. There were months even before that I was working up to launching this podcast and getting all the guests and recording ahead and everything involved. I'm going to share much of that with you, and I'm going to share why it has been recommended to me and why I 100% agree that at this point in time is the best time for me to take Men of Abundance to a 1-day-a-week show instead of a 3-day-a-week show. We're going to have a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of value that you're going to be able to use from my experience of launching this podcast. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher so that you do not miss that episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now let's introduce our featured guest. Tom Schwab certainly knows how to build an online business. Marketing at its heart is starting a conversation with someone who could be an ideal customer. Tom helps small business owners, entrepreneurs, and solopreneurs get featured on leading podcasts their prospects are already listening to. Then he shows them how to turn listeners into customers. That is huge, and we talk about that during this conversation. You're definitely going to want to listen in on that. Now here's a fun fact. Tom is also seeking the Guinness Book of World Records of being interviewed on the most shows. I'm honored to be one of them. Tom, welcome to Men of Abundance.
Wally, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, some of your clients have come on, and that's how I got to know you. We're going to get into who your clients are and what you do and here in just a minute. But where are you at in the world?
I am in beautiful Kalamazoo, Michigan, and right now it's a beautiful season because the vineyards are right outside the window here, and everything smells like Welch's grape juice. People say, "Do you make wine out of those grapes?" And I'm like, "Nope, they make grape juice out of it."
That's something. I have not been to Michigan and certainly not Kalamazoo, but that I will end that with I have not yet been there because I do plan on getting around the United States. I've been all over the world. I just haven't been all over the United States just yet.
Well, I've been around Hawaii, but I've never stepped foot on there. So you can come to Michigan and I'll go to Hawaii.
Sounds good. How is that you've been around Hawaii? You sail?
I was in the Navy. I was fortunate enough to have my college education paid for by the taxpayers at the Naval Academy, and then I was on an aircraft carrier, and we were going over to Desert Storm, and it was the newest and finest aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, and we were drawing 48 feet, and Pearl Harbor was dredged to 50 feet, and the skipper said, "We are not running aground a brand new aircraft carrier on the way to war." So with that, the rest of the battle group pulled in for 4 days of R&R and some repairs, and we went around Hawaii for 4 days. So I can say I've been there. I just didn't enjoy it like everybody else.
Absolutely, and I live right in Pearl Harbor. I live right where the channel's at, so I see the subs and the destroyers. In fact, my next door neighbor, he manages one of the weapon systems on the John Paul Jones, And I see these things come in and out, and quite often some of those guys that come in, they just don't get a chance to get off the island. It's got to be torture.
Well, it's take everything with a grain of salt and be grateful for what you have, not jealous for what you don't.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you said that, because I like to start the show out the same way I start out most mornings, which is with an attitude of gratitude. So what do you have to be grateful for today, Tom?
Oh, man, we could fill up the entire podcast with that. But, to me, I would have to say that, I'm grateful more than anything for my family. I'm married. I got 4 great kids, a great son-in-law, and, 2 great grandchildren. The youngest one is 4 weeks old. So, that'd be the last thing that I ever wanted taken away from me was my family. So that's the first thing on my gratitude list.
Absolutely, and that is most definitely the most important thing to be grateful for, as far as I'm concerned as well. Before we got started, mention just a little bit about you, a little bit of your bio, but I'd like to hear it personally from you, because on Men of Abundance, we like to get to know the man behind the business, or the man behind the success and greatness and abundance. So if you could, get a little bit personal.
To me, it's interesting. I always say I'm middle-aged, right? I'm 25 years old with 25 years of experience. So I'm 50 years old, and as I look back, my story doesn't make any sense looking forward. When I was 17 years old and left my hometown, this is not where I thought I would end up. But boy, everything that I have done has built on it. And I see that, God's got a plan for my life, and that, there was a reason that, I trained as an engineer, and that's how I think. There was a reason that, I ran nuclear power and understand how systems and how you can train people. I was blessed to work in the corporate culture and see how that works. I was blessed to work as an entrepreneur, and all these things are starting to come together. And it's like, all right, now, at the age of 50, I feel like I've got all those foundation things to do something really major for the next half of my life. And I've never been more excited about the next decade of my life than I am right now, because everything that I know, all the connections I have, and all the things that we have, the tools that we have out there, you can complain. I mean, there are a lot of big problems in the world today, and I won't argue with that. But if you just look around, what we have access to here, we would have never dreamed of 20 years ago. The President of the United States couldn't have had those 20 years ago. And, some mornings I just pinch myself, and it's like, wow, I'm talking to someone in Hawaii on a free service that we could do video chat back and forth on. And it's like, that is cool. And so I guess that's where I am. I'm 50 years old, but I've still got the excitement and sort of the joy and the possibilities of what could be that I see in my granddaughter's eyes. That's 2 years old.
Isn't that amazing? That truly is amazing. I'm 48. I'm about a year and a half behind you, and I get the chance to talk with people clear across the world, all the way in London and all over the place. It's straight out of the Jetsons, the stuff we can do today, as far as our technology and communication is concerned, without a doubt. We certainly live in the best times ever. I mean, we're most prosperous, have the ability to be the most abundant in everything we do, and it truly is a great time to be in.
I tell people that today, if you're isolated or ignorant, it's by choice. You can connect with people. And, I just saw something the other day that every course that MIT offers is free online. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't get the degree, but you can get the education as long as you have an internet connection.
Agreed. In fact, I wish I could remember the guy's name, but there was a young man who got his entire MIT degree completely 100% outside of the school itself. Of course, he didn't get the actual degree, but he got the equivalent, and then he was able to actually challenge the test, pass the test, and technically was able to get his full degree, everything 100% online. So obviously, we definitely have an abundance of information. It's just a matter of getting it all and putting it together and making something of it.
That's for sure.
Yeah. So obviously, as we're going to get a little bit into what you're doing now and how we got in contact, but even before we do that, in your 50 years and everything that you've done so far, and I always say anybody who's doing anything certainly has a kick in the gut moment, if not one, several. I'd certainly like to hear at least one of your greatest kick in the gut stories.
The kick in the gut is always, the good one is when they kick you a little bit lower than that. I always call it, getting kicked and moving the chess pieces around. And there's so many times in my life that I can look back at that. Just about the time you think you've got life figured out, somebody kicks the chessboard, moves all the pieces around, and the first thing you think of is, oh, this messed everything up. But you may be actually in a better point. And I look back on my life and say, when I was in the military, that was a steady career, right? You got a job, you were an officer, and the idea was just, stay there for 20 or 30 years and you can retire. Well, I got in at the Reagan buildup. And right about the time that my commitment was up was right around the time when the Soviet Union collapsed. And with that, you took a great industry, a great career path, and just a kick in the gut where it's like, we don't need all these people anymore. You can stay, but there's not going to be the bonuses. There's not going to be the promotions. And the same thing's happening now to some great people in the military that have never done anything wrong. It's just that, there's cutbacks on there. And I had the same thing in the corporate world where, I had a great corporate job and I had my own business at that point, but I was the manufacturer's rep and, they were my only customer. And so I had my whole life figured out what this is going to look like for the next, 10 or 20 years until I retire. And then all of a sudden the great recession hit and the manufacturer said, we want to cut out the middleman and go direct. And that always sounds great until you look in the mirror and say, wow, I'm the middleman. And so that was sort of, the kick in the gut. The chess pieces flew around. They did right by me, buying it back. But when the chess pieces, landed and I looked at them and I'm like, wow, I'm in a better position. I've got more opportunity here. From that standpoint.
You bring up a very good point. And it sounds like the making of a great book. Instead of Who Moved My Cheese, it's Who Moved My Chess Piece. So one of us is going to have to come up with that.
That's right. We've got to buy that website before this goes live because there's some listener that's going to check to see if that website's available.
Most definitely, and I've got a couple websites already purchased for ideas that I've got. So either I'm going to make them or somebody's going to buy those those URLs from me. Awesome. So what was that enough is enough moment? What made the pivot point, other than looking at your new chess pieces and seeing where their positions were at? What was that pivot point and how you kind of got into the direction that you're at now? Or
I think for me, sometimes enough is enough. It has to hit you a couple times. And, it had hit me enough times where I had one employer and everything was tied to one customer. Right. So if it was either the military and the Navy or when I just was a manufacturer's rep running a distributorship, I looked at that and said, everything is in one bucket with them. And if anything changes, that's a problem. And with that, I just looked at it and said, we've all got to have more diversity. We talk about that in finances in our life and everything. And so I just said, enough is enough. As I started companies, I said I want a more diversified number of customers. I don't want to just work for a small company or a small group of customers. And I've even turned down some big contracts because I said, nope, that's going to take too big of a portion of my business that I want to have a diversified one. So for me, enough is when I just decided that, no, I want to work for myself and I want to have lots of bosses. I want to have lots of customers, not just one.
What was you working on that you didn't want to, have all of your customers in one big account?
Yeah, and so for me it was, I had just was in the corporate world, had a distributorship that had just sold back to the manufacturer. And really the next normal step that most people would say would be like, man, with the connections, with everything you have, go find a new manufacturer and be the rep for them, be the rep in the Midwest and build the organization there, or, take your contacts and get a job with one of the manufacturers and use that. And I'm just like, nah, I don't want to just be tied to one. And so with that, we looked at it, and we had a little sideline business, and it was helping people that couldn't bear weight and couldn't bear crutches after surgery. And one of the things is that most of the things that we offered them were rented. So when we got them back from, just customers here in West Michigan, most of them, half of them would come back with thank you notes. And my wife and I looked at that and said, wow, we're really making a difference here. Could we use this to help more people and grow a business? And we knew that we couldn't build it, with the same ways that people had in the past, building brick and mortar and a huge sales force. We wanted to try something new. So at that point, that's when I said, no, I'm not going to just take another job or another same path down the normal one. I want to learn more. I want to do more. I want to serve more. And so that's where we really said, hey, can we grow this sort of e-commerce business from a regional player, and can we grow it nationally? And I'm so glad that I took that route, because that's where I learned, more marketing skills than I learned in my MBA, because I was actually doing it and using the new tools of the internet and really being able to use the tools that we all have to help people. And, Zig Ziglar said, if you help enough people meet their dreams, you'll meet yours. And that's really what we did. And we did it with something it was called inbound marketing. It's a buzzword. It's basically, people don't go to the internet to be sold. They go there in order to have their problem solved and to find people that'll help them. So we really did that and tried focusing on, how can we provide content that will help people going through a hard time. And we did that. We were able to grow that business, to sell that business, and then help other people grow their business by a similar strategy.
Yeah, that's truly amazing. And of course, I completely agree with Zig Ziglar's quote, and the more people you help, the more that you'll get out of life. And that's not always monetary wise, that's also emotionally, which I feel is, I'm not going to say it's the greatest thing, because as Zig also says, if you think money's not that important, it ranks right up there with oxygen, right?
Yeah, but never forget that richness of a life, or having a rich life, has things to do well beyond your bank account. You can have a rich life and not have a huge bank account, or you can have a huge bank account and not have a rich life.
Exactly correct. And that is a big part of what Men of Abundance is all about, is having that full abundance in everything that you do in life, not just your bank account. So the way you and I got in contact was Karen had been connecting me with Aaron Walker and a couple other folks that she had mentioned after my interview with Aaron, which is an amazing individual, speaks very highly of you and speaks very highly of Interview Valet. And then, of course, she mentioned that I need to get on the line with you. And after realizing who you were, I was like, well, absolutely, I got to have a conversation with Tom. So I truly appreciate Karen for that.
I love podcasting. It's really called, the Inc. magazine called it the new networking. And it's so true, all the people that you get to meet from it. And that's one of the reasons that I love what we do, at Interview Valet, connecting, great guests with great podcast hosts to share their message and really talk to their ideal customers. And I get to meet so many great people too. It's like, this is fun.
So how did that all come about? I know what Interview Valet is about, and I know what you guys are doing, because I first heard of it actually when Aaron had given a plug and talked about it on one of his Facebook Live videos. And I looked it up and I said, well, that's really a great idea. Darn it, why didn't I come up with that? Right? Because it's just perfect for connect. I mean, one of the best things to do and the best way to get yourself known and to get things that you want in life is to connect other people. And that's exactly what you're doing. So let's hear a little bit about how that got started and what you guys do for a service.
Yeah, and if you think about it, what is marketing at its heart? Marketing, starting a discussion with somebody that could be your ideal customer. With that, it's like, how do you start that discussion? Do you interrupt them like, they do on television commercials? Or do you try to join the conversation that's already going on there? People talk about, well, I've got a new company, I've got a new brand, I've got something that could really help people, but I've just got to break through the noise. And most of the time what they try doing is shouting louder. And it's like, that's not breaking through the noise. That's adding to the noise. Mm-hmm. And it really struck me. I was traveling to San Diego earlier this year, and I noticed everybody around me had earbuds in. The gentleman next to me on the plane could have been my ideal customer, Wally, but I never would have known it because he had his headphones on. There was no way I was going to talk to him. The only way that I could talk to him is to get in on the conversation that was already going on. And today, more and more people are listening to podcasts. It's 30% of the U.S. population is avid podcast listeners, and that's growing up. It's going up and up. So with that, it's like, well, how can you connect with them and, get in on the conversation in podcasts? And we looked at that, and one way to do it is start your own podcast. And my hat's off to you for doing it. Anybody that says doing a podcast is easy has either never done it or never done it well. The true great ones make it look easy. Wally, everybody's looking and saying, oh, yeah, it looks easy. It's hard. There's a lot of work that goes on in that. So we looked at it and said, it's sort of like that Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week. How can you get the maximum results with the minimum amount of input? And one of the great things is, podcast hosts always need guests. They need content. So if you can get on the podcast, share good information, you can help grow your business. You can help turn listeners into visitors, into leads. And so we were teaching people how to do this. And more we had clients that told us, I understand how it's done, but I want you to do it for me. And I always say our clients are our smartest people. The only experts out there are your customers. And with that, we had a customer that came to me and he said, Sinatra only sang. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but what does that mean? And he said, well, Sinatra was the performer, and he had other people to do everything else. And he said, I want to be Sinatra. I want to go on podcasts and talk about my new product, my new book, my new coaching service, my new whatever that can help these people. And he said, I want you to do everything else. So if you come to interviewvalet.com, you'll see the tagline, you be the guest, we'll do the rest. That was I stole the tagline from it. It was good. So with that, we really just help people get their message out there. We help them refine it. We help them, find the podcast. We help them prepare for the podcast. We do everything to make it easier for the podcast host. And really, our goal is to do everything so that they can get out there, tell their story to their ideal customers, and really connect and do marketing that helps people.
Yeah, and then you go on to share the podcast art, even the ones that I've had, the folks that I've had on through Interview Valet. Then you guys turn around and create some graphics and some art and post that out on the social media sites. I thought that was amazing.
Well, okay, everybody, this is like behind the curtain. This is how the process works, and I always say it's not magic. I share it openly. If you listen to the podcast, if you read the blogs, it's the recipe is there. And really, one of the things is it's not just getting on the podcast, because there's 350,000 podcasts. So you can get on a podcast. That's not the problem. Mm-hmm. It's getting on the right one and then doing things that can move people from being a listener to a visitor. So let me give you an example here that, you probably see with other of our clients. If you've ever thought about being on a podcast, there's 6 secrets to doing it. There's 6 ways to get on your first podcast, and I could go ahead and list them, and you wouldn't remember them all. So I'll put those together, Wally. I'll make a page up at interviewvalet.com/abundance, and everything that Wally and I talk about will be there, and there'll be the 6 secrets to getting on a podcast. You can go there if you're interested. There's a video there that'll talk about, a 30-minute training on how to do this. And there's even the checklist that I use. I'll put up there for every podcast. So what I just did there is I gave people a reason to go from being just a listener to a visitor. And I didn't do it the nicest way. It was blatant. But with that, we help our clients do that too. So we build that web page for them that everybody gets sent to. We'll take the social media and we'll promote that, because it's an interview is like fuel, right? So if you just have that fuel go up there, you'll get a big burst. But if you've got no engine to put it into, to drive them back to your website, to do those things, you won't get work out of it. And then the other thing too is that it's like a fuel, or it's like a firework that goes up, where it goes up once, and if people don't see it, it's gone. Well, social media is just a great way to make sure that people know about it. Somebody that finds out about our podcast interview here in 2018 is going to bring them just as much value, just as much entertainment as the people that do when it posts, right away. So we do all of those things for our clients, really to get them the maximum impact of every interview.
There's so many great podcasts out there, and it's just like many good books. Most of them will never make it off the shelf because the word just wasn't put out there in the right way anyway. So truly a great service, and I'm all for the done for you type of service as well. So I'm looking forward to taking a look at that checklist, and I'll certainly be going there. And Men of Abundance, I'll be posting that in the show notes at menofabundance.com.
As you know from the military, we always joked that checklists were written in blood, and I'd say most of the blood on that checklist is mine. So it's better to learn from other people's mistakes than your own. So follow that checklist. If you're going to be on any podcast interviews, if you'd like to do that, just follow it through. It keeps you from making the stupid mistakes that I made once in my life.
Exactly correct. I 100% agree with that as well. So, Tom, we're at the point where we're going to pay it forward. Are you ready for that?
Yes.
Outstanding. So give Men of Abundance 1 to 3 actionable steps that they can take today, whether it's podcasting or just in life in general.
The first one is share your message. You've got something amazing to tell other people. What's ordinary to you is amazing to other people. And if you don't share that, you're really depriving somebody else of that. Number 2 is cross-pollination. Expose yourself to new ideas. In nature, you only get fruit from trees or from plants if there's cross-pollination. They have to be exposed to different things. Well, I think the same is true in life. You're only going to get new fruit if you get exposed to new ideas, new people, and it's not going to happen by accident. A bee's not going to come and introduce you to Wally or somebody else. No, you've got to go and reach out, and that could be learning new things on a podcast, learning new things online, reaching out to people, all of that. And then the third thing I would do for a thing of action is that if you've got a business, a product, a service that could help people, well, tell them about it. You're doing them a disservice if they don't know about it, and find a way that's easy to do that. You don't need a huge budget for it. You just need a huge heart to help people, and you can do that. One of the easiest ways that we found is being a podcast guest. We make it easy and we help people. But if you don't have the finances to hire somebody to do that, well, you can take the time to do that yourself. And like I said, if you want to get on your first podcast, just go there at interviewvalet.com/abundance. And I'll give you the secrets to get on your first podcast. There's a training there to show you how to use the system. It's not magic, but take action. If you want more abundance and be thankful for the abundance you have, share it with other people.
I want to chime in on that real quick, Tom, because I know who my abundant leaders out there are. And quite frankly, you brought up a very good point that I had actually never even brought up on this show, which is you don't have to podcast. And I don't advocate podcasting. I just talk to a lot of amazing men. But many of the guys out there, and there's 30% of my listeners are women, as a matter of fact, have great information, great products, and don't necessarily want to start a podcast. But you have an obligation to share that with other people. And you don't have to sell it. You just have to talk about it. Your passion comes through in voice, more so than writing. And go to get that checklist so that you can get on other people's podcasts, because there are many products that I've learned of over the last 6 months or so since I've been listening to podcasts every single day that I would have never heard of had I not heard of it on a podcast. What daily habits make up the biggest impact in your life, Tom?
For me, it's routine and schedule, and I know this is different for people at different parts in their life. To me, I love a schedule and a routine. The morning routine, the evening routine. All of those things. My day seems better when I work the plan. I plan the work and then work the plan. And to any of you young parents out there, I've my heart goes out to you. We were just babysitting or watching our granddaughter when our grandson was being born, and I got new appreciation for people with young families, because a 2-year-old granddaughter had no appreciation for my schedule or my calendar, but she sure knew what my priorities were. So, if you can, plan your day, do it as best you can. There's always going to be things that come up, but it's much better to get more impact if you work a plan as opposed to just reacting to it.
What book would you recommend to our abundant leaders, and why?
There's a great book by Rabbi Daniel Lapin called Thou Shalt Prosper. I love this book. And he just talks about, lessons from the Old Testament, why the Jewish people have been so abundant and have had great businesses in light of some of the challenges they've gone through. And it really changed my view on business as a ministry and a service, and really what place money plays in there. He talks about money being certificates of appreciation from your customers.
Excellent. And I'll have that book listed as well at menofabundance.com. So, Tom, I have one last question for you, and it is one of my favorite questions to ask people because I'm always so curious about this. What does living a life of abundance mean to you?
To me, it means that you realize that you've got things to offer other people and to share other people. I've met some extremely rich people that didn't live abundant lives because they always felt like they needed more, and it bothered them, and it limited their life. And the same way, I've been overseas. I've seen poverty like we don't see in the United States here, but I saw people living in abundance there, where they appreciated what they had. They were there to share with others what they had, even if it was just a smile or a good word. And to me, you'll have a much, much richer life if you have an abundant life.
Wonderful. Absolutely love that answer. So we're going to close this up, and before you go, I'd love for you to leave us with a parting piece of guidance and any way that we can reach you.
Sure. Wally, it's been great to be here. I really, really appreciate it. Appreciate the podcast. And I guess the last word that I would have is that if you're listening to Men of Abundance, you're listening to this podcast, you understand the impact that podcasts can have. Now, you also understand that podcasting is growing, and that in the future, your ideal customers, your ideal clients will be listening to podcasts. And really, there's only one question. Will they be listening to you or your competitor? And you can answer that in one of two ways. You could either be a podcast host and start your own podcast, or you could be a podcast guest. Heck, you could even do both of those. And I would just encourage you that if you see where this trend is going, do something now. Be one of the leaders like Wally here, not one of the followers. And as far as contacting me, I'm on social media. I say I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, but my family and laundry is in Kalamazoo, Michigan, but I live online. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I love that platform. I'm the only Tom Schwab in all of Kalamazoo. And I tell you what, on that same page that I made with all of the show notes, I'll put all of my contact information for social media, my email, all of those things. You can connect with me at interviewvalet.com/abundance.
Perfect, Tom. I absolutely appreciate that. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I thank you for all the information that you shared and for the list that you're providing to Men of Abundance. It's going to be extremely powerful to myself and helpful for many other men and women out there, I'm sure.
Thank you, Wally.
Awesome. Have a great day.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.